I grew up in a blue two-story house on Maple Ridge Road in Denver, America, a place that looked warm and calm from the outside but felt cold from the moment you stepped inside. The house had a wide porch with chipped white paint, a wooden swing that creaked even on still days, and a small front garden that I spent years trying to keep alive. I planted flowers every spring, even though I knew my father would forget to water them, and my mother would complain that dirt made the walkway look messy. Still, I kept hoping the house would feel like a real home one day. It never did. Inside, the air always felt tight somehow, as if every breath had to pass through judgment first. My parents, Linda and Charles, spoke to me in a way that made me shrink without even realizing it. Their voices weren't loud or cruel in the obvious way. They were smooth, casual, almost playful, as if belittling me was part of some inside joke between them. My mother would shake her head slowly at me, as if disappointed before I even opened my mouth. My father wore a half smile whenever he called me a dreamer, and it wasn't the kind of smile that made you feel supported. It was the kind that told you he thought your dreams were dust. Then there was my older brother, Evan. He was the favorite even when he came home stumbling, smelling like cheap beer and regret. My parents always had an excuse ready for him. He was stressed. He was misunderstood. He just needed time. They called him their golden boy, even during the nights he tripped over furniture and spilled drinks on the floor. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one who should be grateful they allowed me a roof at all. It didn't matter that I cleaned the kitchen every morning after they left cups everywhere. It didn't matter that I handled small tasks around the house without being asked. It didn't matter that I never caused trouble. Somehow, existing in a calm, responsible way made me invisible, something my parents didn't find as entertaining as Evan's chaos. What they never saw was the world I was building behind the closed door of my small room upstairs. They never saw the late nights when the blue glow of my laptop screen lit up my face as I typed for hours. They never heard the whispers of my customers from Europe and America, people who trusted my online store more than my own family ever trusted me. Every night, while my parents dismissed me and my brother slurred his way through another drink, I packed orders, answered messages, and built a business from scratch. My online store earned $60,000 a month. I did it alone, with nothing more than an old laptop I bought for $200. I never told my parents because I knew they wouldn't believe me anyway. They had already decided I was useless, so the truth didn't fit their story. Still, I cared enough to help. Maybe it was a habit. Maybe it came from a part of me that still wanted my family to see my worth. When I learned they were struggling with their mortgage, I stepped in quietly. For a whole year, $2,000 left my bank account every month to pay for the roof they slept under. They never knew. They never asked why the payment suddenly became smooth and easy. They simply assumed life was finally being kind to them. But kindness was something they never gave back. One night, while we all sat around the dinner table, my mother said something that changed everything. She laughed, swirling the wine in her glass, and joked that even Evan, with his bottle, had a brighter future than I ever would. My father joined in, smirking. Evan, barely able to sit straight, gave me a lazy grin as if agreeing with them made him feel important. The words hit me like ice water down my spine. It wasn't the first time they mocked me, but something in that moment felt final. Maybe it was the ease with which they said it. Maybe it was the way the house stayed silent after, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the insult and agreed with them. I went upstairs and closed my door, but the house did not feel like it belonged to me anymore. Maybe it never did. I sat on my bed, staring at the laptop that had carried me through every long night, and I realized something important. Love was not supposed to feel like poison. Home was not supposed to feel like a wound you kept reopening just to feel something. Weeks later, during an argument about family expenses, my parents told me I needed to move out. They said they were under pressure and couldn't afford to feed another adult. They said I wasn't contributing, though I had been contributing more than any of them ever knew. They didn't ask what I was doing with my life. They didn't ask if I had money. They didn't ask where I would go. They simply said it was time for me to leave. I didn't fight. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I packed my clothes, my laptop, and a few things I cared about into 2 bags. When I walked out the front door, my mother didn't look up from her phone. My father didn't say goodbye. Evan was passed out on the couch. As I stepped onto the porch, the air felt warm, soft, and strangely new. For the first time in years, breathing didn't hurt. They had no idea that the person they pushed out the door was the only one keeping their house together. And I knew that the moment I walked away, everything would begin to crumble behind me. When I left my parents' house, I felt like I had stepped out of a storm I didn't even know I was standing in. I found a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Denver, not far from the foothills. It wasn't fancy in any way. The floors were old and creaked under every step, the windows whistled on windy nights, and the kitchen was so small I could touch both counters if I held my arms out. But the first morning I woke up there, with sunlight spilling through half-broken blinds and the smell of my own coffee filling the room, I felt something I had never felt before. Peace. No footsteps were stomping downstairs. No snide comments drifting in through my door. No fake laughter directed at my failures. Just quiet. Warm, soft, clean quiet. I walked to the balcony, a narrow stretch of wood with a shaky railing, and stood there watching the city spread out beneath me. Denver looked different from this height, as if the world was finally big enough for me. With the freedom came focus. My online store, which had already been doing well, began to grow even faster. I spent long nights designing new digital products, answering messages from customers in Europe and America, and organizing my sales. Without constant insults in the background, my mind felt sharper. Without the feeling that I needed to shrink to fit inside my old house, I started to expand. Orders increased. Reviews improved. My monthly income rose above $60,000. I had money in my account, a roof I paid for myself, and space to breathe. Every day made me wonder why I had stayed trapped for so long. Meanwhile, my parents carried on as if nothing had changed. They had no idea their mortgage wasn't being paid anymore because they had never taken the time to understand how it worked. For a whole year, I had been the quiet, unseen hand keeping their lives steady. Now, for the first time, they were on their own. 3 months after I left, I opened my email one morning and blinked at a message titled Urgent Notice. It was from the bank. Missed payment. Another. Past due. Then another. Their account was collapsing like a tower with its base kicked out. I sat still for a long moment, staring at the screen. Part of me felt a soft tug of old habit, the familiar feeling of wanting to fix everything before they even knew there was a problem. But then I remembered the night they laughed at me at their dinner table. I remembered the way they told me to leave, as if I were a bill they could cut loose. I closed the email and went back to work. Over the next weeks, I watched from a distance as my parents' lives slowly cracked. It was strange how predictable it all was. They called the bank, confused and angry. They blamed everything but themselves. They accused the bank of losing payments. My father shouted at customer service until his voice cracked. My mother paced around the living room like a restless cat trapped in a shrinking room. The neighbors noticed. People whispered. The white fence that once made our home seem neat and friendly now looked like a border separating them from reality. Evan, as usual, had no idea what was happening. He still partied, still drank, still treated the house as if it were a magic bubble where life would never touch him. He didn't know that I had been the bubble. He had no clue that the safety net he always assumed existed had already been pulled away months ago. Sometimes I would drive past the old house because some part of me needed to see the truth with my own eyes. The garden I once cared for was brown and wilted. The porch swing hung crooked, a single chain rusted through. The curtains were always drawn, as if my parents wanted to hide from daylight or from the truth settling over them inch by inch. I watched them at a distance, sitting in their living room with stacks of letters around them. The strain was heavy in their posture. My father's proud shoulders slumped for the first time in years. My mother's perfect hair looked messy, as if she had stopped caring. They looked like people finally waking up from a dream. They didn't know I was seeing all of it. I never approached them, never knocked on the door. I didn't owe them explanations. They had made their choices. So had I. Then one afternoon, I drove by and saw two cars parked crooked in the driveway. The front door was wide open, and my father stood on the porch holding a stack of papers while my mother cried on the step. A large yellow notice was nailed to the wood near the handle. Their voices carried faintly into the street. Anger. Shock. Fear. The house had finally been taken. I parked a short distance away, not close enough for them to notice me, but near enough to see clearly. My chest felt tight as I watched them. Not from guilt. Not from joy. Just a deep, heavy understanding settling in me. The house that had always pretended to be warm was now stripped down to what it had always truly been. Empty. Cold. A shell. My brother sat on the sidewalk, his head in his hands. But for once, he wasn't drunk. His shoulders shook and I realized he was crying. Real, deep crying. He had always clung to the belief that I would fix things when they got bad. And now he understood that I wasn't there to catch him anymore. The truth was finally cracking open around them. They didn't see me, but I saw everything. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't wave. I didn't call out to them. I simply watched for a moment longer, then drove away slowly, letting the memory of that house fade behind me like a past life I no longer needed. For the first time, the world felt like mine. A week after the bank took the house, my phone rang early in the morning. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, eating toast and checking overnight orders from customers in Europe, when the screen lit up with an unknown number. I watched it buzz until it stopped. Then it rang again. And again. Something in me tightened, not with worry, but with old, tired familiarity. The kind of feeling you get when someone who once hurt you suddenly needs something. When the call came a fourth time, I finally answered. At first, there was only breathing on the other side, shaky and uneven. Then my mother's voice slipped through the line, thin and trembling, a sound I had never heard from her before. "They took the house," she whispered, as if the words were too heavy to speak clearly. "We didn't know what was happening. We thought you were still helping us." For a long moment I said nothing. I stared at my coffee mug, steam rising in slow curls, and felt the strangest thing. Nothing. No rush of guilt. No urge to fix anything. Just quiet inside my chest. My mother swallowed hard, the sound sharp through the speaker. "We didn't know it was you," she said again. "We didn't know you paid anything." And that was the truth. They never knew, because they never cared enough to ask. To them, I had always been the one who contributed the least, when I had been the one holding everything together. They never wondered how their mortgage stayed steady during the hardest times. They never wondered why I stayed up late in my room. They never wondered what I dreamed of, what I built, or what I sacrificed. They didn't wonder because they didn't think anything about me was worth knowing. I leaned back in my chair, letting her words float in the room like dust in sunlight, noticeable but no longer painful. My mother sniffed softly, a sound I had only heard when she praised my brother for crying during his hangovers. This was different. This was fear. Then I heard him. At first, it was muffled, but it grew louder, rawer, until it filled the speaker. Evan. He was crying. Deep, broken, childlike, crying that didn't sound like my older brother at all. He was sobbing so hard I could barely understand him. "Please," he begged in the background. "Tell her to talk to me. She always helped. She loved us. Please." My mother tried to quiet him, but he kept crying, calling my name like a lifeline he never deserved. I closed my eyes and listened, and with every sound he made, memories washed over me. Nights he mocked me, days he pushed past me, moments he let our parents use me as a target so he could keep his golden halo. He cried now because he finally saw the truth. He cried because he finally understood that I had been the one holding everything together. He cried because he thought I would save them again. But I wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't explain anything to either of them. I simply lifted the phone from my ear, pressed the red button, and let the silence fill the room again. When the call ended, the quiet felt peaceful. Not empty. Not cruel. Just peaceful. as if the weight I had carried my whole life had finally slid off my shoulders and hit the floor where it belonged. I sat there for a while, sipping my coffee, letting the moment settle inside me. Somewhere in the distance, I heard cars passing on the street, people starting their day, the hum of life continuing. For the first time, their suffering did not pull me downward. It did not wrap itself around me like chains. Instead, it reminded me of every night I cried alone in that house when no one heard me. It reminded me of the times I cleaned up after their fights, the times I stayed quiet to keep peace, the times I tried to earn love from people who never wanted to give it. Now it was their turn to feel what they gave. Later that day, I took a walk through the neighborhood near my apartment. The air was crisp, the autumn wind brushing leaves across the sidewalk. Children laughed as they ran from one yard to another. Dog walkers passed with friendly smiles. Life felt warm and open, nothing like the cold world I grew up in. I thought about how far I had come from the girl who once tiptoed around her own home like a visitor. I stopped at a small park bench, sat down, and looked out at the open field. The sky was pale blue, stretched wide like a blank canvas. I thought about the house on Maple Ridge Road, the place that had taken so much from me. I imagined my parents sitting in some motel now, staring at themselves, forced to face all the things they spent years avoiding. I pulled out my phone and opened the financial dashboard of my business. Orders were flowing in. Messages from customers filled the screen. I had earned more that morning than my parents had ever believed I could earn in a year. I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't the person they told me I was. I was building a life they never saw coming. My phone buzzed again, a new number this time. I didn't answer. I didn't even check the voicemail. Some doors deserve to stay closed once you walk out of them. I returned to my apartment, made myself a warm meal, and worked through the evening. My customers needed help. My business needed attention. My future needed building. Their tears came too late. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. A month passed after the house was taken, and the calls from my parents slowed, but didn't fully stop. Most came from numbers I didn't recognize. Sometimes voicemail messages appeared, filled with silence or half-broken sentences where someone had started to speak and then changed their mind. I didn't return any of them. I didn't listen twice. I didn't let old wounds reopen. I had built a world where I didn't need them anymore. But one evening, as rain tapped against the windows of my apartment, there was a knock on my door. For a moment, I froze. It was late, well past the hour when neighbors usually stopped by. My heart beat in a slow, heavy rhythm as I walked to the door. When I opened it, the hallway lights glowed behind the figure standing in front of me. It was Evan. He stood there, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to his forehead, clothes clinging to him. His eyes were red, not from alcohol but from exhaustion and grief. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't swaggering or smirking. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, like someone who had finally been stripped of every layer he used to hide behind. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice thin and shaky. For a moment, I considered closing the door. Not because I hated him, but because I had learned to protect myself. But something in his expression made me step aside. He walked in slowly, dripping water on the floor, glancing around at my little apartment as if stepping into a foreign world. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands shaking. I stayed standing, arms crossed gently, waiting for him to speak. The rain outside grew heavier, filling the room with a soft rushing sound. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything." His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't step closer. I simply listened, something he was never willing to do for me when we were younger. He continued, "I know what we did. I know how they treated you. I should have stopped it. I should have stood up for you. I didn't. I let them make you small so I could stay big in their eyes." He rubbed his face hard, as if trying to wipe away years of guilt. "I didn't know how much you did for all of us. I didn't know you paid the mortgage. I didn't know you saved us over and over." Tears slipped down his face again. He didn't hide them. They won't admit it, but they know now. They know they pushed away the only one who ever cared. They know they ruined everything. He looked up at me with hollow eyes. They're staying in a motel off the highway. It's awful. They asked me to find you. They want help. I felt the words like cold drops falling into warm water, sinking without dissolving. I took a slow breath, feeling the truth settle deep in my chest. They didn't want help, I said softly. They wanted control. Evan nodded without arguing.
He knew I was right.
They think you'll forgive them, he whispered. They think you'll fix everything. I thought about the girl I used to be, quiet, scared, desperate for approval. The girl who paid their mortgage without a single thank you. The girl who stayed small so others could feel large. The girl who carried a family that never carried her back. But that girl didn't live in my apartment anymore. I sat down across from Evan, keeping a careful distance. I don't owe them anything, I said calmly. Not anymore. He wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. I know you don't. But I needed to say sorry. For myself. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain filled the silence. Cars moved faintly down the street. Somewhere below, a dog barked. Life kept going, even as an entire chapter of my past felt like it was finally closing. I took a breath. I hope you get better, I said honestly. I hope you fix your life.
Not for them. For you.
He let out a shaking breath, as if he had been holding it for years. I want to, he murmured. I just didn't know where to start. You start by not depending on someone else to clean up your mess, I said. You start by learning who you are when no one is rescuing you. He nodded, staring at the floor. The truth sometimes hurts more than lies ever could. After a few moments, he stood. I won't bother you again, he said quietly. I just needed to ask forgiveness, even if I don't deserve it. You needed closure, I corrected. And that's okay. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm coming back. He swallowed, nodded once, and walked toward the door. When he opened it, the hallway light surrounded him in a pale glow. He looked back at me one last time. I really am sorry, he said. I know, I replied. He left, closing the door gently behind him. His footsteps faded down the hall, then disappeared completely. I locked the door, then leaned my forehead against the wood. But I didn't cry. I felt calm, whole, safe. For the first time, my past didn't feel like a shadow behind me. It felt like something I had finally stepped out of. I walked to my laptop, opened my dashboard, and saw new orders waiting. Customers in America and Europe were buying, praising my work, and trusting me. My income had risen to nearly $75,000 a month. My future was mine. My peace was mine. My family had made their choices. Now I had made mine. I didn't look back. I didn't go after them. I walked away for good.